Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 21 of What If Naruto Was the Red X. If you guys enjoy this what if, and want to see part 22 of it, comment down below, and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. Jump City. Naruto walked down the streets of Jump City with his eyes narrowed dangerously, Kitten beside of him. I wonder where all the citizens are. Kitten wondered while looking around, and Naruto crossed his arms. Not sure, but they obviously aren't in the innermost areas of the city anymore. Naruto says darkly, and Kitten rubs her arms at the ominous tone he used. Man, it's like the further inward we go, the worse things seem to get. Kitten suddenly noted, and Naruto slowly nodded his head. Inwards is where Ivy and the bulk of these damn plants are coming from, so things will be more chaotic around there, especially if Harley brought any Smilex with her. Naruto replies while clenching his fist and narrowing his eyes even further. Incoming crooks at 12 o'clock. He grumbled, and Kitten grinned evilly, while cracking her knuckles, when she saw whom he was talking about. Hello, misplaced aggression, she said happily before crouching down and launching herself forward, Naruto forming a few explosive X in his hands, and tossing them at the crooks on the sidewalks. The crooks all flew back from the explosion, while Kitten jumped into a flying roundhouse kick, sending another crook to the ground. Spotting the twin thieves, the rest of the crooks rushed them, believing that their greater numbers would earn them a victory. So, how many can you take? Naruto asks while walking to stand at Kitten's side, the blonde girl taking a mock thoughtful expression. There might be a problem if one more shows up, she quips, and Naruto smirks slightly while unlocking the three long blades from the sides of his gauntlets, three spiked knuckles forming out of the fists of his gauntlets, and crackling with electricity as he does. Then that'll be the one I have to take care of, Naruto quips back at her as the crooks soon surround the two, Kitten smirking towards him in amusement. What, you're actually fighting? She asks in mock shock, and both suddenly lunge into the fray of criminals. Kitten rolled forward and then quickly twisted into a sweeping kick, knocking three men down. Narrowing her eyes, the girl then spun in place, lifting one leg up to kick the three crooks, slamming into one another, before then all three were sent flying into another group of crooks. Quickly moving, the currently pink-haired girl flipped over the next few criminals coming her way, and tossed several of her pink X shuriken into the faces of the men around her, causing them to stumble back. Landing behind them, Kitten twisted around, then brought her knee to one man's head, knocking him forward where she stood on top of him, arms crossed and smirking. Come on, who's next? She quips with a grin, thanking whatever god or goddess liked her for those self-defense classes she took as well as dancing. In response to her quip, a few men suddenly started to pick up pipes, knives, and chains, and hold them threateningly. Great, I just had to ask, Kitten inwardly grumbled, while taking a defensive stance as the crooks came swinging at her. Meanwhile, Naruto casually walked forward, the crook coming at him having an electrified fist to the gut, before Naruto slammed the back of his fist into his face, sending him sprawling on the ground. Another came at the blonde ex-shinobi, swinging a pipe at him. Naruto blocked with his left gauntlet before sliding towards him, and slamming his elbow into his throat. The man stumbled back at that, and Naruto punched him in the face with his electrified fist, sending him flying back. Cocking his head to one side, Naruto wondered why that was so easy, before sighing and raising a fist, his fist connecting with the face of a man behind him, and causing him to drop. Turning and looking around, he saw a man with a chain come at him, swinging the makeshift weapon wildly. Deftly dodging the chain, the blonde former shinobi then kneed the man in the gut, before backhanding him across the fact, and sending him skidding across the ground. Turning his head, Naruto saw a few men with guns, and narrowed his eyes dangerously. You really don't want to do that, he growled out, and the man merely opened fire. Within seconds, Naruto was proven correct as he used his thousand blades jutsu, the hundreds of blades of wind circling him, slicing the bullets to pieces. Leaping and backing away from the man in fear, the crooks shook as Naruto lunged forward, slamming a fist into the first crook's face, then expertly twisting on his heel, to deliver a precise kick to the next crook's face. Landing, Naruto elbowed the next man in the gut, then raised his elbow to his chin, before jumping into a roundhouse kick to the side of the final man's head. Coming down in a crouch, all four crooks fell to the ground in various sprawled out positions, while Naruto looked down at them coldly. Turning his eyes to watch Kitten for a moment, Naruto saw the girl was surrounded by a group with weapons, and mentally frowned. Let's see if she has any fight in her, or if it's all just a bunch of bravado, he thinks to himself while crossing his arms and then raising a fist to hit a man behind him once more, sighing as he does so. I wonder how many times me and Batman have had to do that to people behind us, he suddenly wondered while watching Kitten's own fight. Kitten growled and crouched low to the ground while looking around herself. Inwardly, she regretted not trying for more offensive gadgetry besides her shuriken and the electrified palms of her gloves. Note to self, make more weapons, she thinks to herself while then remembering something she'd added to her cape. Oh right, I added lead to the tips like Batman has after Daddy mentioned that about the Dark Knight's cape. She thought to herself and smirked as a man with a pair of knives came at her. Inwardly grinning, Kitten twisted on her heel while swinging the edge of her cape at the man, the lead tip slamming into his face and disorientating him. That was all Kitten really needed to do as she lunged forward with a kick to the stomach, then ran up his body and flipped back and off of him. Landing in another crouch, Kitten twisted on her heel once more and swept another man off his feet. Rolling on top of him, Kitten slammed her fist into his face. Grinning to herself, Kitten grunted as a pipe hit the side of her head from behind and knocked her to the ground, her ears ringing. Ouch, I am so glad I made this mask into a helmet. She inwardly muses before rolling out of the way of another pipe and flipping onto her feet. Looking around, she yelps as a chain wraps around her left forearm, and another crook reels her in with a smirk. Growling in her throat, Kitten lifted her left leg to stop herself against him, then twisted into a roundhouse kick to the man's head. Landing on her feet, Kitten spun the chain on her forearm and caught it in her hand, smirking despite herself as she lunged forward, swinging the chain into another man's head, then twisting into a kick to the next man's face. Landing in a crouch, Kitten turns to see the last two men coming at her, one with a gun, worrying her greatly. Alright, think Kitten, you can do this. Think of something to deal with these guys, or you're going to be 6 feet under. The Pincat says to herself before her eyes light up when she remembers a weapon she'd taken from her father. Please let it still be in there. She thinks while reaching into her utility belt and removes what appears to be a simple black cylinder. Hitting a small switch while swinging the weapon, a long pink laser whip extended from it and knocked the gun from the first man's hand. Grinning despite herself, Kitten then twisted the whip back around and swung it at the other man. As the whip was wrapping around him, the man screamed out in pain as electricity arched across its beam and he fell to the ground. Bringing the whip back to herself and snapping it at her side, Kitten then twisted once more, allowing it to wrap around the man whom had the gun before. Sending electricity down its length as well, the man screamed out in pain before falling limp to the ground as Kitten turned the whip off. Stowing the weapon into her belt, Kitten blinked when she heard clapping, then turned to see Naruto sitting on a sizable pile of bodies with one leg over the other. Nice work there, Pinky, though isn't the whip just a little bit suggestive given your personality? Naruto quipped with obvious amusement, and Kitten placed her hands on her hips and gave him a look through her mask. You have a sword, I have a whip, seems like a fair trade-off, she states, and Naruto takes a thoughtful expression. Yeah, but my sword doesn't exactly pertain to actions outside of combat like a whip can. He quips once more with amusement directed at the girl, and she huffs before crossing her arms. I'm surprised you haven't accused me of bestiality yet. She grumbles, and Naruto blinks before rubbing his chin for a moment. Must have missed that one, thanks for doing it yourself. He guessed, and Kitten harrumed, both suddenly bracing themselves when they felt the ground shake. Alright, enough witty banter, let's get back to work, Naruto states darkly while standing up and walking over to Kitten, the Pincat nodding her head as turned, Naruto stopping when he heard what sounded like motorcycles. Incoming. Naruto notes, and Kitten frowns as the vehicles head towards them. Picking out two shuriken, Kitten prepares to throw them, but Naruto holds out an arm. Allow me, I've still got a lot of pent-up aggression I want to take out on these unlucky assholes. Naruto growled out angrily before lunging forward. Coming to the first motorcycle, he ran up the front and kicked the man off of it, then shifted his weight in midair and delivered a flying roundhouse kick to the next unlucky criminal. Landing in a crouch, Naruto narrowed his eyes as the last two men on motorcycles came towards him, one with a pipe and the other with a chain. Narrowing his eyes, the blonde ex-shinobi flipped over the first man, throwing an explosive X towards him and sending him flying forward. Landing in a low crouch, he then quickly took hold of the last man, threw him from the bike, and straight into a streetlight. Breathing out a grunt, Naruto then turned to see Kitten gaping at him and ignored her while pulling up one of the motorcycles. Revving the engine, the blonde shinobi looked to his current partner with a raised brow. You coming? He asked, and Kitten blinked before quickly running over to him and hopping onto the bike behind him. Wrapping her arms around his waist, she then looked around before sighing. In the words of my cousin, Will, looks like it's going to be one of those days. Kitten muses with a shake of her head, and Naruto blinks before nodding his head in agreement. Could be worse, we could also have a ghost invasion as well as all this. Naruto notes with a shrug, and Kitten slaps the back of his head. Don't say that, you'll jinx us, she states angrily, and Naruto chuckles lightly in his throat. Nah, Lady Luck loves me, Naruto replies before tearing down the street with Kitten hanging onto him. Elsewhere, Raven sighed as she used her magic to hold onto a screaming Adranting Starfire, Batgirl looking to the Tamaranian strangely. She does know that we can't get to Ivy without walking to our certain death, right? That girl asks Raven, and the Dark Chitana merely sighs in response, while rubbing her face with one hand. She's in love with Robin, and Tamaranians are all highly emotional creatures to an extreme extent. They even need to feel unbridled joy in order to fly, she then states, and Batgirl blinks, before looking back at Starfire and shakes her head. So she has to think happy thoughts to fly, like Peter Pan. Batgirl asks, and Raven stops and blinks for a few moments before slapping her face. How did I not notice that before? She had to wonder and Batgirl smiled, before looking back at the captured Tamaranian, Starfire now pouting as Raven carried her around in a black energy bubble. Think we can let her out now? Batgirl then questioned before all three girls turned to see chaos in the streets. There were criminals everywhere, all of which were making short work of trashing Jump City, while Ivy's plants were attacking anyone and anything that got too close to them. Oh shit. Raven mutters while Starfire gasps in her bubble. We must stop this badness at once. Starfire states and Raven nods her head, releasing the Tamaranian as Batgirl grimaces. Ugh, this looks like Gotham on a bad day. She mutters to herself before sighing and pulled out a few batarangs. Alright girls, let's teach these crooks a lesson. Batgirl orders and the three girls rush forward, Batgirl throwing a few batarangs at a couple of the crooks, knocking guns from their hands, before she slammed a kick to one of their heads, knocking them to the ground. Nearby, Starfire slammed into two crooks then suddenly stopped, sending them flying into two more criminals. Frowning, the alien princess then lands on the ground and lunged at two more, grabbing them by their shirts. She then tossed them to the four laid-out criminals, where Raven used the wires from a nearby streetlight to tie them up and hang them upside down. Well, that's 6 down. Raven used then saw Batgirl kick 4 crooks over to them, all tied up and groaning. Correction, 10 down and an entire city's worth of criminals to go, and that's not even adding the metahumans and super criminals. Raven mutters and Batgirl sighs for a moment. Welcome to my world, she says with a sigh, and Starfire looks to the two with worry over her features. Please, how will we be capturing all of the criminals who have escaped? There are so many of them and so few of us to do the catching. Also, we do not have a way to be repairing the prison of which they are normally held. Starfire asks then says with clear worry in her tone, while Batgirl grabs then brings them all down to the ground as a massive vine passes overhead, slamming into and destroying a nearby building. Personally, I'm more concerned with surviving the night. Batgirl states and Raven nods her head. However, we need to wait for some backup. I called. They should have the antidote for Ivy's lipstick, so we can get your friends back, and then we can worry about all these criminals. Batgirl states and Raven frowns while looking around. But we still need to survive this until that backup arrives. Raven notes with a thin frown, and Batgirl nods her head with an identical frown on her own face. Please, that will not be so challenging. This is much like battling the Gordanians when we first met. Yes. Starfire offers then asks of Raven, and the girl actually stops to think about it for a few moments. Somewhat, only the Gordanians didn't have great as if my night wasn't bad enough. Batgirl mutters while looking at the vine and then to the girls with her. Any ideas would be much appreciated. She states and Starfire looks at the side of the vine and frowns. I may be able to use my eyeballs to cut it down, but I have never tried to do the cutting with my powers. Starfire offers then admits and Raven sighs. Allow me. She mumbles before walking towards the plant and held up a single hand, eyes glowing white seconds later. Azrath Metrian Zinthos, she exclaimed, and the vine was covered in black magical energy, before Raven gritted her teeth and ripped the plant from the ground. Grunting, the young titan then braced herself and tossed the vine into an intersection, cutting it off from vehicles. Whoa. Batgirl uttered then shook her head while Raven fell to one knee, panting heavily. You okay? Batgirl asked quickly while moving over to the younger hero. Holding up a finger to ask for a second, Raven took another few brief moments to catch her breath before breathing out. It takes a little too much energy for me to do that. We might have to find an alternative method until your friends arrive. Raven states and Batgirl nods her head, then reached into her utility belt and pulled out a pair of odd-looking forearm bracers. What are those for? Raven asks and Batgirl pulls the items on, a pair of short buzz saws extending from the sides a second later, as she then smirked. Time to do a little weed whacking, she replied and then turned to look down the road, her eyes widening. A couple of the vines suddenly started to shudder and shake, then began to glow an ominous green for a moment before massive thorns started to grow out of them. Shit. This is bad, they're mutating even farther. Batgirl said in shock and Raven grimaced, Starfire merely raising a brow. But how are the thorns of the plants bad? They hurt when I pick the roses, but they are not dangerous. Starfire notes and Raven sighs. Starfire, poison ivy is known for poison, her body itself can be toxic. Thus, since these plants have her blood in them, they are more than likely very poisonous. Raven explains, and Starfire makes an O with her mouth before grimacing visibly. That will be a challenge, she admits while Batgirl turns on the buzz saws stationed on her forearms. Well, I don't know about you girls, but I'm not standing around anymore. Batgirl then stated before quickly rushing towards the mutating plants, Starfire and Raven looking to one another. Please friend Raven, why do we not make the plan to evade the thorny plants of badness, rather than run through them? Starfire asks and Raven looks into a sewer and grimaces visibly. Because they're in the sewer, crawling along the roofs, inside the buildings, and generally everywhere we turn. There's nowhere for us to run or hide, and so it's better to take the short route, rather than try to sneak past what senses our presence. Raven explains, and Starfire makes an O with her mouth once more before frowning. Friend Raven, please remind me to hurt this ivy of poison very badly, once we are finally finding her. Starfire then asks, and Raven looks at her friend for a moment before smirking. First of all, it's Poison Ivy. Starfire, second of all, get in line. She replies and Starfire grins before both girls fly down the street and around the plants to go after Batgirl. Elsewhere, Kakashi braced himself as the entire base Ravager had them set up in shook and shuddered for a moment. What the hell is going on out there? He demanded while Sasuke, Neji, and Hinata were holding themselves up, Ino and Sakura behind Ravager. It appears as if Poison Ivy decided to come to town and trash it. Ravager replies coldly with a disinterested shrug as she then brings up a view of what was going on up above. Holy shit. Sakura shouted upon seeing the vines and criminals tearing the entire city apart. Who is this Poison Ivy, and where does she get those vines? Sakura demanded while Kakashi and the others made their way over to them, bracing themselves on whatever they can along the way. Poison Ivy aka Pamela Lillian Isley, a former botanist before she was mutated into a plant-human hybrid. She has chlorophyll for blood that mutates plants, and the ability to telepathically control plants. She's a villain from Gotham who has an obsession with plants, and given her an ability to have children, thanks to the experiment that made her as she is, I believe that her love of plants is based on her directing all her motherly love onto them. However, Ivy has shown a startling care for children, going out of her way to protect them in any given situation. Ravager explained while Kakashi looking at Poison Ivy with shock and awe when she brought up a picture. Also, the mutagen used on her made her almost physically perfect, able to regenerate damaged tissue, enhance strength, enhanced endurance, and immunity to all known poisons, and she produces pheromones that make her completely irresistible to both men and women. Add on to this, she's a plant geneticist who can create a wide variety of plant-based poisons and other chemicals and toxins, and the woman is a major threat to anyone in her path. Ravager goes on and Sasuke frowns towards the woman for a moment before crossing his arms. Does she have an accomplice? He asks and Ravager checks her monitors, soon spotting Ivy with a clown girl. Oh, that's bad. Ravager actually said with a grimace, then sighed. Another Gotham villain. This one is known as Harley Quinn, formerly Dr. Harleen Quinzel. She was doctor at Arkham Asylum, an intern, really, who was trying to get her college credit, and no one else would take her. Unfortunately, she got the Joker as her first case. The Joker turned and twisted her mind until he finally broke her. Harley became an obsessively loyal fangirl who had no other thoughts other than helping her pot in the Joker, or as she calls him, Mr. J. Ravager explained and then leaned back in her seat and rubbed her temples. Harley is physically abused, beaten, and generally treated like trash by Joker because he finds it funny, but she's so obsessed she forgives him every time. He's beat her, slapped her, thrown her out a window, kicked her out of a moving vehicle, left her to die on a flying vehicle among other things, and she's remained completely loyal. Also on occasion, Harley will be fired by the Joker, and at such times she usually joins up with Poison Ivy, one of her only true friends. Ivy genetically altered Harley, making her physically more powerful, gaining increased strength, flexibility, and endurance so she can survive Joker's abuse. She also has an immunity to poisons like Ivy, and employs a vast array of clown and joke-themed weaponry like the Joker. Ravager then explained and Sakura blinked when Neji, Hinata, Ino, and Kakashi all looked at her for a moment. What? She asked with a blink, and Kakashi looked away first. Oh, nothing, Sakura, nothing at all. He said with a whistle, and Neji closed his eyes and looked away from her with Hinata and Ino looking to the ceiling. So what should we do about those two? Sasuke then questioned and Ravager stretched out her arms before crossing them over her chest. Nothing, she states, and Sakura looks at her incredulously. Nothing. But they're out there destroying your city, she shouts, and Ravager gives her a pointed look in response. Not my problem. Besides, this gives me the chance to observe the Titans and gather info on our enemies, Ravager states coldly, while turning back to the screen, and Kakashi frowns deeply. It was obvious to him that this girl was ruthless to an extent that bordered on the psychotic, and he was beginning to wonder if it might have been a bad idea to team up with her. But what about all the people? Shouldn't we do something to save them? Hinata asked worriedly, and Ravager scoffed while looking at the screen. This place is protected by a foot of titanium all around. I have no need to save, nor protect any of the worthless peons up there, and besides, what would I get with such an action? Ravager stated curtly, her single cold grey eye causing Hinata to shiver in fear, while she returned to the screen. Now please leave me be, I have too much work to do to play with you, Ravager then stated with a shooing motion while returning to her work on the computer, Kakashi pulling Sakura and Ino with him, while Neji handled Hinata, Sasuke reluctantly following them. Kakashi-sensei, we can't just leave those people to suffer, can we? Sakura asked, and Kakashi sighed. Our mission is to retrieve Naruto, nothing else. If we were to go out, there is a very high probability that we'd be spotted and followed back here. If that were to happen after we were weak from fighting, we'd be captured, and from what I've seen, and with our current record, we'd be taken by the Justice League and locked up in a superhuman prison in space, or worse, that phantom zone of Superman's. Kakashi explained while rubbing his face and sitting down with a sigh. So we just sit here safe, while people are dying? Ino demands, and Kakashi sighs once more while crossing his legs. It's one of the choices one has to make when you're a shinobi. Sometimes you don't get to play the hero when you want to, sometimes you have to let people die. Our mission is all we should worry ourselves with at the moment. Once we get Naruto and the sacred scroll of sealing, we can return to Konoha. Kakashi reminds while crossing his arms, and Sakura and Ino looked over to Neji for support. The Hyuga Jonin merely opened an eye and then frowned. The life of a shinobi isn't all fun and games. Sometimes we are forced to make decisions we'd rather not make. Neji states simply, and Sakura growls in response, before crossing her arms and looking away from them. Downtown roadway. Riding down the roads of Jump City, Naruto suddenly heard something, and turned his head. Looking back, he could see lights heading their way and inwardly grimaced. Turning down an exit, the blonde found himself riding down a long tunnel with almost red-colored lights flashing above them, vines curving all around and flailing. Grumbling to himself, Naruto deftly evaded the arching vines, and then looked into his mirrors. Frowning and grunting when he saw the oncoming bikes, he then tapped Kitten's thigh. The girl blinked, and then gave him an angry glare. "Hey Pinky, before you yell or something, I thought you might want to check out our 6 o'clock. Naruto says, and Kitten blinks in confusion, before turning her head, and then grimaces upon seeing a group of criminals on motorcycles heading their way with pipes, chains, and whatever else they could find to use as weapons. Great, motorheads. She grumbles to herself, and Naruto chuckles lightly to himself while revving the engine. Hold on Pinky, this is going to be a bumpy ride. Naruto exclaims while Kitten hold on tighter. Riding down the street, Naruto smirked as one of the motorheads came up at his side, swinging a chain at him. Evading the attack, Naruto then formed an X shuriken in his hand, threw it at the man, connecting with his head, and knocking him off of his bike, and tumbling down the road, as more motorheads came up behind them. Can you please keep your eyes on the goddamned road? Kitten demands, and Naruto turns his head and curses, swerving out of the way of a downed car, while one of the motorheads screamed and jumped off of his bike before he would have hit. Breathing a sigh of relief and looking to his mirrors, Naruto growled when he saw 4 more motorheads heading for them. I swear, don't these guys have anything better to do than mess with me? Naruto grumbled, and Kitten rolled her eyes. Not really, and given the state of the city, I don't think it's likely they'll be letting us go too easy. Kitten notes, and Naruto nods his head, before reaching back, and then unsheathed his sword. What the hell are you going to do with that? She demanded, and Naruto held his blade downwards, the tip scraping along the ground and sparking. I'm going to deal with these motor-headed morons, that's what, not to mention those vines. Naruto states, then nudges forward, and Kitten gasps when she sees a mass of vines forming into a wall up ahead with thorns covering them. What's with the thorns? Naruto had to wonder, and Kitten shrugged her shoulders. Personally, I don't want to know, so let's not find out. Naruto then states, and Kitten nods her head in agreement as Naruto slashes his sword, a stream of wind launching forward as Naruto cut the vines down and past them, the motorheads hot on his tail. Turning his eyes to his mirrors once more, the blonde grimaced as a motorhead came up at his side. Hold on Pinky, I can already tell this is going to be one hell of a party. Naruto says while using one hand to control the motorcycle, as one of the motorheads comes up beside of him with a pipe. Grinning despite himself, Naruto slashed at the man, cutting his bike's front wheel off and causing him to be sent flying off of it as it fell forwards. That's what you meant? Kitten demanded, and Naruto chuckled. What did you think? I was going to kill them. Sorry babe, killing people really isn't my style. Naruto quipped while riding down the street, inwardly admitting that this was also kind of fun for him. Seeing a bunch of vines up ahead of them, Naruto considered cutting those down before an idea came to mind. Revving his engine, the blonde shot forward, sword's tip sparking along the ground as he cut a small part of the vines apart, allowing him to ride through. Looking to his mirrors, he saw an explosion before 2 of the motorheads rode through the small hull and came up on his rear. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Kitten accused, and Naruto grinned in response. Of course babe. This is a blast. I can't remember the last time I had this much fun while I was playing the hero. Naruto exclaims with a laugh, Kitten screaming as the blonde axe shinobi revved the engine of his motorcycle and shot forward. Smirking beneath his helmet, the blonde looked to his mirror once more and watched as the last 2 motorheads came at him. Looking forward, he looked for something and grinned when he saw a piece of concrete half hanging from the ceiling. That'll do. He thinks to himself before swinging his sword, sending a quick burst of wind flying towards the concrete and knocking it down. The concrete landed on top of a car with a crash, and Naruto reared back on the front of the motorcycle. Allowing the front wheel to come down on the concrete, Naruto rode up along it and into the air. Screaming as he did, Kitten's grip on the blonde axe shinobi increased while a motorhead came up beside them. Shifting his weight, Naruto managed to kick out at the motorcycle when it was close enough, sending it and its rider falling to the ground. Landing and chuckling in his throat, Naruto looked down at Kitten's arms as she held onto him. You know you're hanging on a little too tightly. Naruto groans out, and Kitten shakily raises her head and glares at the back of his head. Shut up. With you driving like such a lunatic, it's a miracle I haven't died of a heart attack. Kitten screamed at the blonde furiously, and Naruto rolled his eyes before turning his eyes to his mirror. Spotting the last of the motorheads, an idea came to the blonde and caused him to grin widely. "Hang on tight, Pinky, things are about to get really wild," Naruto exclaimed while revving his engine and screaming forward. Flipping his sword up, he quickly sheathed it, and then watched as the last motorhead came up towards him. Narrowing his eyes with an amused smirk across his lips, Naruto grinned wider than ever, as he saw several vines up ahead of him. Reaching into his coat and placing several explosive notes onto his bike, the blonde shinobi smirked. Looking to the bike at his tail, Naruto then slowly got up, pulling Kitten with him. As he did, Kitten wondered what was going on, only to scream when the young former shinobi then flipped off of the bike and spun into a kick, knocking the motorhead off of his bike, and landing on it with a grin. Boom. He then exclaimed when the bike was close enough to the vines, causing the explosive notes and the bike to explode, and knocking the vines out of his way. Riding past them, Naruto laughed loudly, and Kitten shakily glared at him, fury clear in her azure eyes beneath her mask. "Ha! Now that's what I call a party. Think there are any more of them?" Naruto asked with a laugh, and Kitten slapped the back of his head angrily. "What the hell? Are you out of your fucking mind?" the girl demanded, and Naruto merely continued to laugh. "It's not funny," Kitten shouted before biting her lip. "It's not," she tried to say, only to start laughing as well as they rode out of the tunnel, soon spotting downtown. "Almost there," Naruto says, and then curses when a gunshot nearly hits them. Swerving to the side, then looking to his mirrors, Naruto grimaces upon seeing Johnny Rancid is on their tail. "Shit, looks like the motorhead's boss is hot on our tail." Naruto grumbles, and Kitten turns then grimaces when she sees Rancid as well. "Great, and I thought things couldn't get worse." Kitten groaned out before looking to Naruto. "Got any bright ideas for this guy?" she asks, and Naruto nods his head, turns and heads onto an off-ramp. "Just hold on tight and don't even think of letting go till I tell you the cost is clear," Naruto orders while taking a deadly serious tone and narrowing his eyes. Unlike the other morons thus far, Johnny was by far and wide a more threatening presence. Unlike them, he knew how to ride and ride well. Also, he had twin revolvers to fight from a distance. While Naruto would normally be limited to his sword, of course he was still pissed about Ivy and Harley, but he managed to blow off a lot of steam on those last few motor-headed losers. Cursing and dodging a bullet aimed at them, Naruto then looked to his mirrors and frowned, inwardly groaning when he could only think of one way to deal with the man. He patted Kitten's thigh once more to get her attention. "Pinky, take control of the bike," he ordered while ignoring the loud "what" the Pinkette shouted at him, before he twisted around her and came to the back of the bike. Lunging forward and taking hold of the handles of the bike, Kitten inwardly plotted Naruto's very painful death, while gulping and holding the bike steady. Behind her, Naruto situated himself reverse of normal and narrowed his eyes while pulling his sword from his back. "Alright Rancid, let's do this," Naruto inwardly muses while narrowing his eyes as the gray-skinned biker tears down the road, getting closer and closer to them. "Why is he even after us? As far as he knows, we're criminals like him," Kitten demands, then exclaims, and Naruto rolls his eyes. The motorheads are Rancid's gang, 10 to 1. He doesn't like it when his boys are getting the shit kicked out of them. Naruto replies while keeping his eyes on Johnny, then quickly blocked a bullet that was heading towards him. "Alright, now how do I deal with you, Rancid?" Naruto wondered while narrowing his eyes, only for Kitten to gasp and draw his attention. "What's up, Pinky?" he asks the girl, and she shakes slightly. "Blockade," she replied, and Naruto cursed while turning back to Rancid. "Try and keep the bike going steady, I'll be right back," Naruto states while sheathing his ninjutsu. The blonde then jumped off of the bike and into the air, teleporting. As soon as he was high enough, he came down on the front of Johnny's bike and narrowed his eyes on the man. "Shit, what, are you crazy or just stupid?" Johnny demanded while pointing his revolver at the ex-shinobi. Firing the weapon, Johnny was surprised when Naruto deftly avoided the fire by twisting his body to the side. "No, the name's X, Red X," Naruto growls out before placing a glowing red X onto the dash of Johnny's motorcycle, then jumped off of the bike and teleported back to Kitten. Appearing above Kitten, her came down and swung behind the surprised girl and causing her to yelp. Meanwhile, Johnny blinked, then looked at the glowing X, the glow pulsing and the pulsing slowly becoming more and more rapid. "Oh, shit," he shouted before jumping off of the bike and rolling to a halt as his bike sped forward for a distance before exploding. "Damn that bastard. He's so gonna pay for this," Johnny roared angrily while throwing his helmet to the ground and then kicking it. Elsewhere, Naruto and Kitten continued riding, drawing ever closer to the blockade, and Naruto narrowed his eyes. "Move over, I wanna drive," Naruto states while swiftly getting back into place while Kitten shakily wrapped her arms around his waist. As she did, Naruto got into position and opened 2 slots on his gauntlets, twin thermal blasters folding out of them at his wrists. "What are those?" Kitten asks over the roar of the engine, and Naruto smirked. "You know that highly experimental handheld thermal blaster that went missing a couple years back?" he questioned, and Kitten slowly nodded her head. "These are modified and even smaller versions that Gizmo integrated into my gauntlets," Naruto then states, and Kitten's eyes widen in shock. Well, what isn't in that suit of yours? She asks, and Naruto shrugs his shoulders before holding on to the handles of the bike and firing his twin thermal blasters forward. The blasts from the weapons impact with the blockade seconds later and send it flying in a burst of red light, Naruto and Kitten riding past the debris, while his blasters fold back into his gauntlets. I love these new gauntlets. And these are just the prototypes. I can't wait to get my hands on the perfected models. Naruto says happily, and Kitten gapes before shivering at the thought of what the perfected models would be like if those were only the prototypes. Riding further down the street and into Jump City, Naruto soon spotted an off-ramp and then turned onto it. Riding down the off-ramp, Naruto soon spotted the telltale black energy of Raven's powers. Yes, there they are, he exclaimed with a grin while riding towards the energy. Thank Kami-sama, your safe card-chan. Naruto thought to himself while riding towards the girl. Looking around, Naruto nearly gaped seeing people were still in this area, and thus Raven, Starfire, and Batgirl were trying their damnedest to ensure the safety of all the citizens. Inwardly groaning, Naruto then tapped Kitten's thigh once more to get the Pinkette's attention. Hey Pinky, check it out, Naruto states, and Kitten looks as well and gapes. Bolsheviks, criminals, fires, and everything else that comes with a disaster like this, we have to help those people, she stated, and Naruto nodded his head, soon spotting the three Titanas. At the moment, Starfire was flying into buildings and pulling people out, Raven forming ramps for the upper levels so that the people could get down. Meanwhile, Batgirl was dealing with most of the criminals as Raven got the people to a nearby bus for safety and to keep them together. Yo? Naruto called out, and Batgirl turned to see him as he came up beside her. Blinking as he did, Batgirl couldn't help an exasperated sigh at seeing the skull-masked thief at a time like this. Why am I not surprised to see you out and about? She wonders with her arms crossed over her chest, Naruto shrugging his shoulders in response. Need a hand here, Red? He asks with an amused tone, and Batgirl blinked for a moment upon seeing the skull-masked thief. Sure, but who's she? Batgirl questioned while motioning to Kitten, and Naruto chuckled lightly. As she wanted you to know, would she be wearing a mask? He quipped, and Kitten snickered in response, Batgirl frowning. Right, I mean, what do I call her? She asks, and Kitten merely points to the X on her chest. That should be obvious to the girly crusader. Kitten states with amusement at one of the nicknames Batgirl had earned over the years. In response, Batgirl blinked for a moment before suddenly growling towards the pink-haired girl furiously. Why, you little? She growls out, but before an all-out brawl between the two could occur, Naruto got off the bike, Kitten following suit. Well, I would love to see a catfight between you two. I'm more interested in surviving the night, Naruto comments, and Batgirl nods her head, still glaring at Kitten angrily. Wow, XS really don't get along with Batman's sidekicks, Naruto notes before spotting Raven and quickly running over to her. Card-chan. Thank Kami-sama, you're alright, he said while grabbing her into a hug, and Raven blinked in surprise. Naruto, what are you doing here? She asked quietly, and Naruto released her, then looked around to make sure no one was watching him. Starfire appeared to be busy saving people, and Batgirl appeared to be trading insults with Kitten as they beat on criminals. Wow. It was like him and Robin in the bodies of girls. I came to help you, Naruto finally admitted, and Raven raised a brow. Not that I'm complaining, but isn't that kind of dangerous for our secret? She asks her boyfriend, and he rubs the back of his neck. Well, I may have been one of the reasons Harley was in town, but I never said she could bring Ivy with her, Naruto admits, and Raven pinches the bridge of her nose, wondering why that didn't surprise her any. Right? Raven mumbled, then felt the ground shake. Anything I can do for you, Kar-chan? He questioned, and Raven blushed. 1. Try to refrain from calling me that. Neither Starfire nor Batgirl know your identity, and if you keep this up, it's going to be blown big time, Raven stated with her arms crossed, and Naruto blinked before grinning nervously. Right, sorry about that, but I was just really worried about you, Naruto says, and Raven's look softens. Thanks, she offers before both brace themselves, and Starfire flies out of the building and down to them. Friend Raven, I have evacuated all of the civilians from this building, Starfire said, then stopped when she saw Naruto. Hello Red X, what are you doing here? She offered with a small wave, and Naruto shrugged his shoulders. Harley came to visit me, brought Ivy with her, and now both are trashing the city I live in, my city. And nobody trashes it but me, Naruto explains with a nod of his head, and Starfire frowned in thought. Then it is a matter of pride, yes? She asks, and Naruto blinks. Something like that, he admits, and the alien princess nods her head. Very well then, so long as you do not do the bad things, I will allow you to assist us without the fighting. But please, would you assist in the rescuing of civilians? Many of these buildings are very unstable, Starfire says, then pleads, and Naruto smirks beneath his mask while looking around. Grinning to himself, the blonde then formed a familiar T-shaped hand seal, and took in a breath. Taiju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, he exclaimed, and hundreds of him suddenly appeared all around them, Starfire and Raven openly gaping. Alright boys, you heard the princess, fan out and do your thing, Naruto then called out, and the clones all gave an affirmative as they all quickly made their way into the many buildings around them. Wow, so you're also a one-man army as well as a former ninja. Raven comments and Naruto rolls his eyes, a serious frown on under his mask. Are there any more buildings or civilians around here? He asked and Starfire blinked before looking at him. Perhaps, but I believe the authorities are dealing with those. Starfire admits and Naruto frowns, before cursing as someone breaks through one of the nearby buildings with a wide grin. Alright, you ready, pukes? Make way for Punk Rocket. The teen exclaimed loudly while holding a guitar in hand. Swinging an arm, the teen then somehow sent a sound wave from the instrument and knocked a car into the air before it then slammed into the ground. No one can stop the sounds of chaos. He shouted with a wide grin, and Naruto stopped everything to look at the odd teen orange jumpsuit, spiky hair, very loud and equally annoying shit. It's like my dope self as a villain. Naruto thought to himself with a flat expression under his mask, then grinned and cracked his knuckles. Oh, I'm so gonna enjoy this. He then said before teleporting behind the strange teen. Tapping him on the shoulder, Naruto watched as Punk Rocket turned to him and slammed his fist into the teen's face, causing him to go flying. The odd teen soon landed in a car, ass down and through its windshield with his head lolling back and tongue hanging out of his mouth. Ah, closure. Naruto muses to himself, before looking up at the building Punk had blown through and grimaced. The building was on its last legs, and from what he could tell would be coming down any second. Great, just what I didn't need. Naruto notes while starting to leave, only to hear a scream. Eyes widening, the young shinobi turned on his heel and jumped onto, then ran up along the wall as the building started to come down. Flipping onto the floor where the scream had come from, Naruto looked around before using his suit to hone in on the screaming, crying for help. As he walked down the hall, Naruto had to brace himself as the building started collapsing. Shit. Why does this kind of shit only ever happen with me around? Naruto demanded before finding the right room and kicked the door down. Where are you? Naruto shouted, then cursed and rolled into the building as debris came down behind him. Panting heavily and looking around, Naruto cursed to himself while opening a door, then backed up upon finding nothing. Turning, the blonde spotted another door and he kicked it down, finding a child's bedroom. Looking around, Naruto soon found a little girl in the closet and quickly picked her up. Cursing, Naruto then fired a grapple as the floor came out from under them, then swung himself over to the window. You okay? He asked, and the girl merely held on to him for dear life. Deciding that was as good an answer as any, Naruto busted the window out and then jumped out of the building, and then teleported to the ground as the building came down behind him. Landing in front of Raven and Starfire, Naruto breathed out a sigh and looked to her. Here. He groaned out while handing the child to Starfire, then looked around. I sure hope that's not going to happen again. Naruto mumbles before all three looked to the side to see a vine had grown up and out of the ground near the bus with all the people. You have got to be kidding me. He exclaimed while Kitten and Batgirl came over to them. Anyone here know how to drive anything but a motorcycle? He asked while looking over the girls, and Raven blushed. Actually, I do. She admitted, and Naruto looked at her in surprise for a moment before sighing, and then rubbed his temples. Right, then go do that. Me and Starfire will try to keep it off your tail. He states before feeling another shudder of the ground, as strange pods started to pop up all around the area. What the fuck are those? He asked, and Batgirl frowned, a criminal near one of the pods apparently too close, suddenly being hit by a strange spore it expelled, knocking him to the ground dead. Shit. Ivy's plants are starting to mutate again. Those are similar to some spores Ivy unleashed on Gotham a while back. They're lethal, she says while pulling out several batarangs, and Naruto groaned, then pulled his sword from his back. Great, then how do we stop them? Naruto asked, and Batgirl frowned. We have to rip the core out of them, she replied, and Naruto frowned. That was going to be a little too close for comfort. I can do that, Kitten suddenly said, and they looked at her. My suit was recently equipped with the same materials as a hazmat suit, so I can get near poisons and toxins without ill effects, she explains with a smirk, and Batgirl frowns. So can I? My suit was made with similar intentions, and also has other settings, she states, and Naruto shakes his head. Either way, both of you need to get rid of the ones in front of the bus. Raven, tell everyone inside to close their windows. Starfire, you take the girl to the bus and find her family, then I need you to come back and help me deal with this big ass vine before it crushes the bus and the people with it. Alright. Naruto asks, then questions, and gets nods from the girls. Batgirl tapping her mask, a pair of white lenses coming down over her eyes, as she pulls a gas mask from her belt and puts it over her lower face. Good, now move out, Naruto orders, and the girls do so quickly, Raven and Starfire entering into the bus, while Kitten and Batgirl head for the pods up ahead. Damn, what a night, Naruto mutters to himself tiredly, while narrowing his eyes on the nearby vine. Lunging forward, Naruto swung his sword, the wind from his blade sailing towards the flailing tendril. However, seconds before the burst of wind would have cut it in half, the vine moved out of the way and Naruto grimaced. Great, this one won't hold still, that means they're learning, he noted before cursing as the vine then swung at him and crushed the ground he had been at seconds before. Starfire chose that moment to return, a starbolt hitting the vine and making it lash out at her. Starfire, try to keep it busy for like a second so I can cut it down, Naruto shouted at the red-haired alien princess, and she quickly nodded her head while flying around above him. Zipping around the vine and staying far away from the thorns on the object, Starfire threw her starbolts at it once more, while Naruto waited for the right moment. Flying around, Starfire soon turned, causing the vine to turn, and Naruto quickly lashed out, sending another arch of wind flying and slicing the vine near the ground. Well, that's that. Naruto muttered as the vine fell to the ground, started to spasm for a moment, and then became still. Breathing out a sigh, Naruto then sheathed his sword while Starfire landed near him. I believe that we should make the haste and assist the Batgirl and Pink X now, please. Starfire said, and Naruto frowned. No? I'll handle the pods with them. You go get to the bus. You're not immune to those spores, nor do you have any protection from them. Naruto states, and Starfire looks at him before demurely nodding her head and flying after the bus, Naruto teleporting to Kitten and Batgirl's side. Alright ladies, how many more do we have to trash? Naruto asks the two, and Kitten points, Naruto grimacing when he sees the number of pods in their way. Shit, alright, that does it, no more playing around. Naruto grumbles and makes a T with his hands. Kagebunshin no Jutsu. He exclaimed loudly, and then looked around at the group of a half-dozen clones around him. Alright men, rip out the cores from those plants, but watch out for the spores. Naruto orders, and the clones all give quick affirmatives before rushing forward, doing as ordered and quickly moving from pod to pod. Ha, now that's what I call progress. Naruto notes with a nod of his head, crossing his arms and waving for Raven to follow them as they move forward. Why didn't you do that earlier? Batgirl suddenly asks the blonde ex-shinobi, and Naruto rolls his eyes. That takes a lot of energy. I was hoping to conserve some for when I get my hands on Quinn and Ivy. Naruto admits, and Batgirl nods her head slowly, somewhat able to see his point. Walking forward, Naruto stopped when he felt a pulse of something, Batgirl and Kitten feeling it as well. What was that? Kitten wondered, and then she and those around the area covered their ears upon hearing a pained scream. No? My babies. I'll make you all pay for every plant you kill. Ivy's semi-distorted voice roared out from all around, and Naruto's eyes shot wide open. Shit. How does she do that? Naruto wonders, and Batgirl frowned. Ivy can channel her voice through the plants around us. We must really be getting to her. She's that pissed at us though. Batgirl explains, and Naruto grimaces before bracing himself as the ground starts to shake and shudder beneath them. But what new hell is this? Naruto wonders, then curses as his clones are smashed by something up ahead. What is revealed is a plant the size of 3 elephants, with the shape of a giant Venus flytrap-like head. Only the teeth looked real on this one. Its mouth was oozing out a green pus that sizzled on contact with the road, and it had the poison thorns of the other vines. And 2 spore pods growing on its side. Oh my god. Kitten breathed while backing away. Shit, Ivy is really pissed. That girl muses, and Naruto frowns before reaching back and unsheathing his sword. Get the civilians out of here any way you can. I'll deal with that thing personally. Naruto states, and Batgirl looks like she wants to argue, but a glare from the ex-shinobi is all that is needed to shut her up. Nodding her head afterwards, Batgirl takes hold of Kitten's arm, and drags her over to the bus and hops inside. Turning his eyes back to the giant flight trap, Naruto flips his ninjutsu along his shoulders and smirks. Alright you oversized guard and wait, time for me to cut you down to size. Naruto growls out while flipping his ninjutsu into a reverse grip and crouching into his stance. Looking at the massive flight trap for only a second, Naruto then lunged forward, knowing the vine-like plant would probably dodge any wind blades he tried from a distance. Hoping it didn't have any close-range attacks, his hopes were dashed when several vines shot out of the ground around the flight trap. I won't let you destroy it. Ivy's distorted voice rang out all around him, and Naruto grimaced, then cursed and flipped away as the vines slammed into the ground. Alright, I'm going to have to deal with the vines if I want to get at the main lead. Naruto notes while quickly considering his options. One was to let the massive flight trap eat him, then use a Taiju Kagebunshin no Jutsu from the inside to cause it to explode. However, given the fact that seemed to be some form of corrosive acid dripping from its maw, he was against that. Also, running on any of the vines was dangerous due to the poisonous thorns, and those damn pod spores were no better. Of all the villains in the world, I had to end up with one of the ones with enough experience and abilities to actually give me a real workout. Naruto grumbled while wishing she didn't want to kill people, so he could actually enjoy fighting her. Shaking his head and looking up, Naruto rolled out of the way of another vine, and contemplated what a few Kagebunshin could do to help him. Besides disorientating the thing, he'd also be able to buy a few seconds for a couple quick Rasengans. However, they wouldn't be big enough for these suckers' weight. Rasen Shuriken would. Sheathing his ninjutsu once more, Naruto quickly formed a half-dozen Kagebunshins with the order to distract the main plant, and then ran to the side to form his attack. Closing his eyes and forming his chakra into his hand, he watched the clones dodge and weave around the flailing vines. Just a little bit longer, guys. Naruto thinks to himself before smirking as he holds the finished attack, and then quickly rushes forward, and then throws the jutsu towards the plant. Grinning as it goes, he's shocked when the vines all suddenly started to fold and wrap together into a sort of wall, protecting the flight trap as it sinks down into the ground, the vines being torn apart as the Ancient Shuriken then rips through the empty street behind them. "Oh, you've got to be shitting me," Naruto exclaims before cursing as the flight trap comes out of the ground from below him, mouth open and Ivy's laughter echoing. Grunting as he took hold of the jaws of the flight trap open, Naruto tried desperately to avoid the acid-like spit sliding out of it. "Of all the ways to go, I never suspected it'd be a plant that would do me in," Naruto complained while the jaws closed down on him. Grunting, the blonde pushed outward, chakra being diverted to all his limbs and causing the jaws to open up. However, just as Naruto was about to free himself, the plant threw him up into the air. Cursing and shifting his weight, Naruto tried to avoid the plant before several more vines shot out of the ground to grasp him. Wide-eyed Naruto formed another Rasen Shuriken into his right hand and threw that at the vines, falling past them harmlessly. He was captured in the jaws of the flight trap once more. "Damn it. What does it take to kill this thing?" Naruto demanded before an idea came to mind, and he held his right arm up and activated his thermal blaster. Aiming it into the mouth of the beast, he fired, Ivy's voice screaming out in pain as he was thrown high into the air once more. Unfolding the second thermal cannon from his other arm, he then fired both of them at the giant plant, taking it apart as he fell. "Shit, it's a good thing I have those. Getting the Rasen Shuriken ready is too slow for me to hit that thing without it moving out of the way," Naruto mused before looking down and groaning as he saw dozens of flailing vines reaching out for him. "Honestly, Kami-sama, what did I do to deserve this?" Naruto had to wonder and pulled his ninjutsu free as he came closer to the vines. Shifting his weight and slicing through the vines, Naruto then reached into his coat and unsealed his second ninjutsu. Holding both in his hands, the blonde launched downwards, swinging his sword and evading the dozens of flailing vines, before being caught in the jaws of the flight trap once more. Grunting and growling as it caught him, Naruto freed one arm and slashed the top of its mouth with his first ninjutsu, then while it was in pain slashed with the second as well. Falling from its jaws once he had, Naruto then slashed with both swords into an X, cutting the top of the flight trap away from the rest as Ivy screamed out in pain from wherever she was. "I really should have thought about learning some way to fly with chakra control," Naruto shouts while falling downwards and then grunted while spinning out of the way of a vine. "Honestly, don't these things ever give up?" Naruto demanded of the obscenely persistent vines, then began to spin in midair, blades outward and cutting through the vines heading towards him. Coming out of the spin slightly dizzy, Naruto shook his head, then teleported out of the way of another vine, and then another and another. Growling, the blonde ex-shinobi then swung both of his ninjutsus, sending blades of wind into the many vines heading his way before spores from several pods came flying at him. Arching out of the way, Naruto then folded his arms against his body and went flying downwards. Looking all around, he then spotted his target. "Let's really get to the root of this problem," Naruto quips with a smirk while sheathing one of his ninjutsus, then formed one last Rasen Shuriken into his hand, and then rearing his hand back and throwing it downwards. Watching the attack spiral downwards, he pumped a fist when it hit the roots of the plant, causing it to flail around before finally falling to the ground lifelessly. Covering his ears when he suddenly heard Ivy's shriek of pain, Naruto grimaced. "She's going to kill me for that," he notes to himself, before cursing as two more of the giant plants suddenly sprout from the ground below him. "Kuzo. I hate it when I'm right," Naruto complains loudly, before reaching back for his other ninjutsu, and then prepared for his next attack. However, he then saw a streak of red, and was shocked as he watched as both plants and vines were all quickly cut away. "What the hell?" he wondered with a gaping jaw before the streak of color came right at him. Once did he found a pair of hands holding him up by his underarms as he was now somehow flying. Blinking and turning his head to his rescuer, even though he honestly didn't need rescuing, Naruto found he was staring at a platinum blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl. "So you alright?" she asks while flying with the ex-shinobi over several buildings, and Naruto blinked for a moment. "Yeah," he states as they come down, and he turns his head to see Batgirl and Raven rushing over to them, the police now driving the bus deeper into the city. What took them so long? He wondered, and Raven shrugged her shoulders, while Naruto turned to get a better look at the blonde girl. The girl was his height, with long straight platinum blonde hair, her bangs cut to above her dazzling azure blue eyes, and a thin build with painted red lips twisted up into an amused smile, and held a curvy figure that most supermodels would kill to have. She wore a black hairband, a white t-shirt with short sleeves that bared her midriff, a red cape that ended just above her hips, a blue mini-skirt, white kid gloves, and tall red leather boots. However, Naruto widened his eyes when he noticed the bright red shield on her chest with an S in it. "Supergirl?" Naruto asked the platinum blonde teen, and the said blonde smirked, while nodding her head. "Yep," she states, and Batgirl grins as she walks over to her. "Nice to see you again, Supergirl. I only wish it was under better circumstances," Batgirl says to the platinum blonde, and Supergirl grins towards Batgirl in response. "You kidding? This is going to be a blast," she states, and Naruto leans over to Raven with a raised brow. "She called Supergirl for help?" he asked warily, and Raven grimaced. "She's not all she called. She replied and Naruto went wide-eyed, wondering what new hell he'd just gotten himself into. Great. But where are Starfire and Pinky? He asks and Batgirl turns to him while standing beside of Supergirl. When I called Supergirl, I had her get some antidote for Ivy's kisses from Batman. Starfire and Pink X both went to free the Titan boys. Batgirl explains while a red and yellow streak suddenly zipped over to them, an arm now over Batgirl's shoulders. Yeah, I managed to get Pinky close to BB, she should be good on her own, for now at least. The Blue stated, while Naruto looked at him with wide eyes as he easily recognized who he was. This person was revealed to have swept back red hair with bright blue eyes, tan skin, and a thin build. He was dressed in an odd skin-tight outfit that started off with yellow boots, red pants, a yellow top with a red lightning bolt across his chest, red forearm-length gloves, and a yellow mask that left his hair, mouth, and eyes visible with red lightning bolts on the sides. Kid Flash. Naruto said in shock before turning when he heard something. When he turned he saw another girl, this one using what looked like a lasso to wrangle one of the many giant plants that were sprouting up around the city. The girl was a teen like Kid Flash and Supergirl, only she had long black hair pulled into a high ponytail, bright blue eyes, fair skin, with a strong build, curvy figure, and painted red lips. She wore star-shaped gold earrings, a sleeveless skin-tight red dress with yellow stars over it, a yellow belt around her waist with a W on it, a pair of black-heeled boots, silver bangles over each of her wrists and forearms, and held a golden lasso. Wonder Girl, too. Naruto muttered in shock, and Raven sighed while shaking her head. It's a regular who's who of super teens. She mutters and Naruto slowly nods his head, since they were also the most well-known super teens, and probably the most experienced of them all over the Titans. Right? But what do we do now? Naruto asks and Batgirl frowns in thought. The police said they've gotten most of the civilians to a shelter, and those that were injured were taken to the hospital. She muses and Naruto frowns before turning his head, seeing several vines start to wig out. Batgirl, I think the plants are mutating again. Naruto warns while Batgirl curses when a fine red mist starts to expand out of the plants. Shit. Poison, Wonder Girl, get out of there. Batgirl shouts but Supergirl zips over to Wonder Girl and flies her to a roof. Raven grabbed Batgirl, Kid Flash ran up and Naruto yawned, before teleporting up to land with them. Great, now the whole city is filled with poison. What the hell is Ivy thinking? Naruto demands and Batgirl frowns while looking over the city. No, she's not got them over the entire city, looks more like specific sections. Her plants can't cover the entire city with that stuff, or it'd just be blown away. Batgirl muses and Naruto walks over to look out over the city for a moment. Great, still gives us a problem and those poison clouds will make it extremely hard for us land-based fighters to get around. Naruto reminds while looking to Batgirl, Kid Flash coming up at his side with his arms crossed and a nod of his head. Hate to say it, but he's right here, Babs. Kid Flash states and Batgirl frowns while looking around. What I'd like to know is how all these plants are mutating. Wonder Girl states and Naruto blinks. From what I've learned, she's got a chemical spreading out into the air that's mutating the plants. It was also laced with her blood if I'm not mistaken, so maybe that gives her further control of the mutations. Naruto muses and Batgirl nods her head before an idea comes to mind. Alright, if we can destroy whatever Ivy has spreading that chemical, we can stop the plants. They would only last an hour at best afterwards after all the mutations they've undergone. Batgirl reasons and Supergirl smirks while looking to Wonder Girl, then places her hands on her hips. We could bust in and do that. Supergirl reasons and Batgirl shakes her head. No, not a good idea. For one, we don't know what Harley and Ivy have set up for us yet. A full frontal assault with only you and Wonder Girl might just end with you both getting captured or worse. However, there's probably still people in the city. If you can gather them and take them to the hospital, that would be a big help. Batgirl states and Naruto sighs at the confused look now on Supergirl's face. It's like this. You and Wonder Girl can fly, have super strength, and are practically invulnerable to physical assault. It would be more prudent for us to have you two going through the city and rescuing the few citizens who haven't been found before something bad happens to them. Naruto reasons and Wonder Girl nods her head while flying into the air. Agreed. Wonder Girl says with a nod of her head before then turning around to Supergirl with a smirk. Coming, car? She asks of her friend and Supergirl nods her head and follows after her. Don't pout, warriors and heroes don't pout. Wonder Girl says to her friend with an amused expression on her face, and Supergirl gives her a look in response. Yeah, but just once I'd like to be able to save the day without help. Is that too much to ask? She responds and Wonder Girl shakes her head for a moment before flying further into the city with Kara on her heels. As they flew off, Kid Flash looked to Batgirl and Raven, while scratching his head. And what do we do then? He asks and Batgirl looks to Naruto, and he looks over to Raven, before crossing his arms. We should help Starfire and Pikey with Cyborg and Beast Boy. Then we need to figure out where Bird Boy is and save his ass before we even think about taking on Harley and Ivy. It'd be better with us outnumbering them, especially with all these plants around. Naruto muses and Raven closes her eyes, and then turns towards the docks. I know where Robin is. I can get him. she states, and Naruto frowns, before nodding his head. As he did, Raven pulled her cloak in over herself, and then flew off as a large black raven into the sky. Once she was gone, Naruto turned to face Kid Flash and Batgirl, his arms crossed over his chest. Alright, then me and Batgirl will handle Beast Boy. Kid Flash head for the prison in Cyber to help out Starfire. Naruto orders, and Kid Flash leans over to Batgirl with a curious expression. Since when do we take orders from a thief? He asks, and Batgirl sighs before pinching the bridge of her nose. Just go get to work. She grumbles, and he gives a mock salute before zipping off into the distance. Now, how pray tell do you expect us to get to Beast Boy and Pink X? Batgirl asks, and Naruto points to the side, where she can now see a police chopper heading their way. How? She started to ask, and Naruto interrupted her. My helmet has a police band in it. I've been monitoring them all night. The chopper was sent out to assess the situation, but I'm thinking it'll be put to better use for us. Naruto explains, and Batgirl slowly nods her head until Naruto wrapped an arm around her waist, and then teleported them onto the chopper. Looking around, Naruto gaped when he saw Snake sitting back with a gray bandana on, a cig between his lips, and what looked like a missile launcher beside him. Damn old man, you really get around. Naruto notes, and Snake grunts, before standing up and walking over to the door. Otacon, we've got a pair of stowaways back here. Snake says to his pilot with a frown and demands size. Looking to Otacon, Naruto spots a man in a white lab coat with a helmet over his head at the moment. Kind of busy navigating here, Snake. Otacon says while maneuvering the chopper around the city. Right? What's the situation? Snake says to Otacon, then asks of Naruto and Batgirl as they look at the two. Poison Ivy's in town, 2 of the Titans are indisposed, and the prison has a gaping hole in it, though I think these vines might have crushed, eaten, poisoned, or otherwise maimed a bunch of them. Naruto says, then muses mostly to himself, and Snake frowned for a moment. We need to head to the prison where you held Plasmus, Cinderblock, and Overload. Beast Boy is there and a friend is taking him on while he's under Poison Ivy's mind control. Naruto then states, and Snake nodded his head, before heading over to his pilot. Otacon, head due east, looks like we're about to get some action. The man orders in his usual low growl, and Otacon sighed for a moment before nodding his head with a determined frown. Honest Snake. Otacon replies while maneuvering the chopper around and then into the distance. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification, and also check out the other videos that I have created, and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.